Hello, everyone. We've got a few more people coming, so we're just going to wait another minute or two before we start. Just to remind everyone that the meeting is being recorded, and there will be a recording available later. Anyone that missed it, if you're listening to this in the future, please do ask questions in the Q&A or in the chat. We'll be keeping an eye on those through the meeting. And there will be some beer tastings through the meeting. So if you got your invitation in advance and your beers have arrived, make sure you've got a bottle opener ready for the bottle. And if you registered too late to get your beers, we are going to send them out to you next week, so you're not going to miss out completely. Okay, we're a couple minutes past. I think there's still a few more to come, but I think we will get started. So thank you all for taking the time out to join us. The subject today is archival and what a good archive can look like and the benefits that it can bring you. We've got a really good group of people here to talk to you. I am Scott Wright from XMA. XMA's head of pre-sales. I think I know most of the people who are in here. We also have David Feller, who is the Chief Technology Officer at SpectraLogic, who's going to talk about what isn't archival and what a good archive can look like. Sean, also from SpectraLogic, is Spectra's EMEA Head of Solution Architecture, and is going to be delivering the demo. And last but definitely not least, we have John Riley from NMIS, which is the National Manufacturing Institute of Scotland, where he is a research and development engineer. He's going to talk a bit about what NMIS does, and also how NMIS are using archival in their research infrastructure. And finally, we have Jake, who is going to be taking us through the beer tastings that are going to be spread through the webinar. So do keep those beers handy. And as I say, make sure you've got a bottle opener. So with that, I'll hand over to David for the first slides. David, do you want me to run your slides or do you want to do them?
We can go. It's okay. I'll do it. Yeah, I've got a few animations. So.
No worries.
Welcome, everybody. This is a lot of fun. This is a first for me doing the integrated beer tasting and webinar. Unfortunately, I'm out of Boulder, Colorado, in the United States, and so I've got my cup of coffee as it's 8 in the morning here. So should be a lot of fun. I look forward to this, and I think we can together really take a look at what backup and archive is and how the two are different, and maybe give you just a few ideas of how this can really fit for your particular organization. Just, I'd say 30 seconds. I promise I'm not a marketing guy. I'm the CTO, so I deal with the products and the engineering mostly. But a quick introduction of Spectra. I think you all have heard of Spectra, and some of you have Spectra products. But you know, we've been around a long time. We're a private company out of headquartered in Colorado. It's the mountainous state in the middle of the United States, and we just have a great time talking about the progression of storage and what it can really do for our customer base. And what's really interesting is most people that have heard of Spectra and know Spectra really know us as a tape company. And we certainly are going to talk a little bit about tape this morning. But we do a lot of other things. We've got NAS products. We've now inserted an object storage layer in front of tape. So there's a lot more to Spectra than most people are aware of. So let's jump in, because I think this is a lot of fun. This is a topic I spend a lot of time on, and it's really talking about the difference between backup and archive. And they are two distinctly different things, and you really need to treat them as different things. And I'm not sure everybody really considers that when you're talking about how do I protect my data. And we're gonna separate this into two conversations. One we call business continuity. How do I get my systems back up and running as quickly as possible after an event, after some bad event? And that bad event could be, a failure of a system. Of course, it could be human error. You'd be surprised how often we get the call of, "Hey, I got this guy and he deleted a bunch of stuff. Can you help us get it back?" That is just as common as an actual failure. And the other one, of course, is an attack, whether it be ransomware. And I would encourage you as well, go take a look at Spectra's story, because this is near and dear to our heart. we were attacked by ransomware about 4 years ago, hard, encrypted almost all of our systems. And we, didn't pay the ransom and recovered, I think it was 99.8% of our data because we did the things we're going to talk about today and really got out of stress mode. You shouldn't be stressed by ransomware if you're doing things correctly. And that's a combination of backup and archive. So backup supported by a lot of the companies, and there's even more. Obviously, there's 50 more backup companies out there, but these are kind of the big ones that we see frequently. The question is, what does backup look like, and why is it different than archive? And really, there's two types of backup that are going on. There's the traditional, we call it GFS, grandfather, father, son. I'm doing dailies, weeklies, monthlies. I've got scheduled retention, and we're going to talk about what that looks like in just a second. But some of the new folks came along, in particular Cohesity and Rubric up there, and changed the game. Now, it wasn't that other folks weren't doing a new modern kind of backup, but Cohesity and Rubric changed the whole conversation, and they're really going hard, taking over a lot of the traditional backup vendors. And the one that responded the best, I think, is Veeam of the traditional folks, and they are jumping in with both feet, doing a combination of incremental forever backups to go along with that grandfather, father, son. We'll talk about that in just a minute, but it can go to a lot of different places now, not just to tape or to disk. A lot of systems are backing up directly to flash, and of course you have the option of backing up to cloud. But really, when we talk about backup, it's about getting your system back up as quickly as possible. So folks like Veeam and Cohesity and Rubric are really about, how do I get my virtual machine infrastructure back up in minutes so that I can continue doing business as usual. And then I'll worry about, how do I fill in the other 5 or 10% with my archive system, or with getting big NAS boxes back up and running again. So it's just a good rule of thumb that's a good way to think about backup. I thought I'd take just a little rabbit hole and say that there are two different characteristics in those two backup systems that we see. And the folks like NetBackup and Backup Exec and Commvault, and even the traditional Veeam systems, really focused for decades on grandfather, father, son. So what we know about that is, I'm going to be writing to, let's say it's a tape library, I'm going to be writing to that tape library every night at 5 p.m. for about 4 hours. And then every week on Friday afternoon or Saturday morning, I'm going to write for 8, 10, 12 hours. And then every month, I'm going to collect that data and write, a big chunk of data. So what I get is, if I'm protecting, let's say, a petabyte, I might actually need, 5 or 10 or 15 petabytes of storage to account for all of those different copies, even if I cycle them. But it's very safe. I know where all the copies are. I've got multiple copies. If somebody hits me with ransomware, I can go back, 3 or 4 versions and get exactly what I need. Well, the new model is much more logical. I'm going to do incremental forever. I've got dedupe and hash change that go for long periods of time, and I'm essentially going to use a lot less storage. Maybe I only need 2 times my primary storage to use either a Rubric or Cohesity system or one of the Veeam systems to perform its storage. But it's significantly harder on the storage. So you have to buy more expensive storage, and you usually have to back up to a ready access, either flash or disk system. And in fact, if you look at Veeam, it's a good example. They've split their backup system into 3 different tiers. So they're doing incremental forever to a performance tier. They're doing copies of that performance tier to a capacity tier in a very generic way. And then I've got a grandfather, father, son system out here in the archive tier. So at a high level, this is what we're all familiar with. And the first question is, we're talking about archive here. Can't I just use my backup system that I already have as my archive? Well, yes, you technically could, but they're really designed for different things. And most of the backup guys have an archive package that's part of what they offer. They think of it as backup as an archive. So I've said, yeah, you can do archive, but one of the industries that I think we ought to all take a look at is the media and entertainment industry. So in the US, that's NBC, CBS, Discovery Channel. Over in Europe, that's people like ITV or BBC, or the big national chains and the big companies in the big countries. They have really taken archive to a new level. And when we say archive, what do we really mean? We're protecting data for the sake of the data. I'm not necessarily trying to get a system back up and running. I'm trying to protect an individual file or a project. In a university space, sometimes that's, I've got a grad student that has been working on a project, a thesis, a doctoral, candidate system that they're working on, and they're done and they're not finished. They don't always finish. I want to take their entire project and put it off for a couple of years to a safe place until I get another person working on that. If I'm in the media and entertainment industry, I want to take all the old versions of everything I've ever filmed and make it searchable. I need each file to be findable, because I'm going to pull it back and I'm going to make money off of it at a later point in time. So a modern archive for IT systems, with a lot of these systems that you see up in the top right, of course, we're going to tell you how Spectre can do it as well, but there's lots of systems that really focus on archive. And a lot of that has to do with grabbing the metadata from the objects, preserving that object as an object and making sure that it's recoverable even 15 or 20 years later. And there's different ways that I can do archive. If you look on the right, you can do project-based. We just talked about that for university. I'm going to take an entire group of things and save it off all at once. A lot of people have just implemented a manual drag drop system. So the CyberDuck system, and there's others where I'm literally just going to take a set of objects and drag them into my archive and add some metadata, manually add some metadata to it. It works great. It's not scalable. I had a great customer of mine come and say, hey, I've got a bunch of data on Isilon. I've got 10 petabytes. And I'm going to turn, I've got 2 interns coming in this summer. I'm going to turn them loose on that 10 petabytes and they're going to archive it all. And I said, I don't think you know what petabyte means. I think you're confused as we talk about scale, how you can't really do that manually. You could ask individual users, and that's the next one, watch folders. You can ask individual users to say, hey, anything you're not using on a regular basis, drag and drop it into a directory called archive. And then every night I'll come through and sweep and move it off. You can get the power of the crowd to help you with the archive. If it's a self-service system, that's certainly an option. A lot of people have opted for automatic systems, HSM systems, and there's some cool things out there like Comprise that do that. But you'll see in a minute, there's some core things we need to pay attention to of what is the perfect archive, and most HSM systems don't fall into that category. That's usually a poor choice because it's proprietary. It's something you're not going to be able to get back 10 years from now or 15 years from now, especially if that company's out of business. So we opt more for auto tier systems, for project-based systems, and systems that really grab a lot of the metadata from the system and say, let's preserve that object because it individually has value. And we're going to make sure that 10 years from now, if you consider it in a marketing sense, you remember that presentation I gave back to the sales guys in 2015. Can you help me go find it? How would you do that from a backup system? Or how would you do that from any other manual system? You really need a system that is searchable, that preserves the data long-term, that uses all those fancy terms like fixity about how do I preserve it? And we'll talk about that in a minute. But archive really is about bringing back objects after a long period of time that have specific value. And our pitch is you need both backup and archive to be really successful. So I think this is the first break. Scott, I will throw this back over to you. Can't hear you, Scott. Sorry, you might be muted.
Thank you. Awesome.
Yes,
Yes.
sir.
So I want to talk a little bit about the benefits of archival. Now, of course, the first and most obvious is data protection and compliance. Now, if you're not getting these benefits from your archival solution, there's probably something quite wrong, because this is the point of archival after all. But there are several aspects to this which are not necessarily all obvious. So the first is you can enhance the protection of data when it is at its most valuable. So for example, if your extremely expensive HPC cluster has a folder where it deposits results, that data has an extremely high cost due to the cost of the machine time that produced it. And you do not want, just for example, a researcher editing that spreadsheet, overwriting it, then going, whoops, I didn't want to do that. So you may say that data needs to be very highly protected. So you could, through your archival software, set policies that say any files that fall into this folder are copied to slower, cheaper storage, to tape, to storage on another site, to tape on another site, to multiple cloud locations. So that data is very highly protected. But then, let's say 2 weeks later, that data should have been moved into the appropriate project folders. It should have been used as it needed to be, and it no longer needs to sit on your most expensive storage. So you may say at this point, once it's reached this age, I want to reduce the number of copies that I keep, and I want to move it off my expensive storage because my user-facing file storage, which is much cheaper than my expensive high-performance compute storage, that is a more appropriate location for it. And that can also be something that your archival platform does for you. Equally, you can very deliberately not keep data if you are working with person identifiable data. So for example, if this was medical research, you may say that once we hit a certain point in this project, we should no longer have this person identifiable data. And once it reaches 6 months old, we should be making a point of deleting it and keeping a record of that deletion. And that is also something you can accomplish with your archival software. So it's not just about keeping a copy for the long term. There are short-term benefits and medium-term benefits to a good platform as well. But that keeping data for the long term is also a very interesting challenge, and this will segue into my next point. Some of the organizations I work with, some of them have goals of 5 years data retention, 8 years, 50 years, 100 years for some of them. Now, if you're going to say with a straight face that you have a good plan for keeping data for 100 years such that you will be able to recover it at the end of it, it is vital that that data is written in a non-proprietary format, ideally the original native source format. If your archive is written in a proprietary format, as is common for backup software, because typically backup applications are interested in very short-term retrieval, maybe a year or two at the maximum. They're not looking at decades, which is often a requirement for archival. It's vital that it's written in a native format. Firstly, because you don't want to be beholden to that archival software provider for decades to come to make sure that you can recover the data you've archived, but also to give you the best chance of recovering it, because these proprietary formats change over time very often. But there is a great additional side benefit to this. If you have an archive written in native format, that archive can be accessed by all sorts of applications. So you can put those archival copies, the copies you made to enhance your data protection, to work for you. Instead of running a very intensive analysis or reporting tool against your primary data set and negatively impacting the performance of your application, you could run that analysis tool against one of your archival copies and therefore have no performance impact on your primary storage application. Make those copies do something useful for you. Get value from them in the short term rather than simply being an insurance policy. That's a really powerful benefit of a good archival system. And if this is something you're investigating, it's a key thing you should be asking. It's by no means a unique Spectre benefit, although it is something that Spectre do and some others do not. But it's something you should be looking for in any good archival platform for a whole variety of reasons we just discussed. Business continuity is also an interesting one as well. As David talked about, business continuity is not the same as archival, it's not the same as backup, but they are all linked. And because an archival platform inherently has the ability to make copies of data, potentially into other locations, it can form part of your business continuity strategy. If, for example, you have a large NAS storage, which is important to the business, and you need a copy of that file data on your other sites, using your archive storage to create and keep updated that DR copy may be more effective than other means if you do not have like-for-like storage with inbuilt replication features. So it may allow you to leverage a cheaper option for your DR file platform and still be able to have a means of getting your data from production to DR for those business continuity purposes. Now, reduction of power consumption and cost is a really big one. There are some really powerful numbers here, primarily around the use of tape as a tier of your storage. And this is something that you can drive via a good archival platform. I put together a 16 petabyte tape configuration for a customer recently, and that was drawing 608 watts when busy, 346 watts when idle. So that's about 10% of a kettle for 16 petabytes of storage. There is no disk or flash storage array in existence that can come anywhere close to those numbers. So taking that data, which is relatively cold, which doesn't need to be immediately accessible, but keeping it still accessible to users by moving it to tape, which has effectively become a tier of your storage platform, the coldest tier, and offer tremendous savings in power consumption. And with the green targets that all of us are striving for, this potentially represents a massive reduction in your data center power consumption, with corresponding benefits, of course, in cooling also. There are big cost benefits too. As I mentioned previously, you may look to move data based on its age, when it was last accessed and so forth, from more expensive storage to slow storage. You could use an archival platform as part of your business continuity plan in order to position less expensive storage in your DR site. And of course, using tape as a tier of your storage offers tremendous cost benefits as well. That 16 petabytes configuration I mentioned was coming in at about £150,000, which is an astonishingly low price for that quantity of storage. Again, there is no tape or flash storage array that can come anything close to those economics. So there is a whole variety of ways beyond making sure you meet your compliance goals and so forth, of course, where archival can reduce costs for you. I have seen examples where organizations were looking to expand their very expensive primary file storage. And once they saw just how cold most of the files on there were, they could instead, via an archival solution, look to archive those cold files, which still keeps them user requestable, and therefore put in a much less expensive storage and tape storage platform, rather than have an expensive expansion of that primary storage. So there's a whole variety of ways that a good archival platform can save you money. And finally, automation. A lot of organizations are trying to do these functions largely by hand, as David mentioned. By driving automation for these tasks that are very simple and really very mechanical, you can free up admin time for more useful purposes, while also ensuring that these tasks are done more consistently and more reliably, which is important when you have compliance and retention goals, and also provably, because these tasks will have an audit trail attached to them, which you do not get when you do these tasks manually. And if you are beholden to some sort of compliance where you are required to meet these goals, potentially at the risk of massive fines, proving that you were delivering a process that was reliable and predictable and auditable is vitally important should anything go wrong and you be forced to prove that you were doing your best to apply to these standards. So a whole variety of benefits that may not be immediately obvious from your archival platform. And with that, we'll move into beer number 1. Before we jump into that, though, if anyone has any questions, please do put them in the chat or in the Q&A tool. We will be keeping an eye on both. And Jake, if you'd like to come on camera, we'll do the first beer tasting.
Hello, everyone. Feel free to turn cameras on if you've got any beers. I'd love to virtually cheers you. But my name's Jake. I'm from a company called The Bar People. I've been in the drinks industry, spirits and beer and wine for 10, 15 years, working with different breweries, different companies, bars, restaurants, predominantly mobile pop-up events. And in previous years, especially since lockdown, we started to do a lot of this sort of stuff, which is presenting different drinks via Teams, and it allowed us to connect really through lockdown. So it's sort of where we sort of grew in that area. We did sort of mixology courses, beer courses, whiskey tasting events. Today I'll be talking about 3 different beers. I'm not sure how many people here have one, but I know Scott mentioned earlier, if you didn't receive it, we will get that sent to you. But we have 3 beers. The first, I would like to go from weakest to strongest, or lightest to darkest. All very different beers, some award winners, some very respected microbreweries. So we've got Strawberry Fields, which is a Vault City beer. I'm not sure if that's blurring me out. Maybe I should can you see that all right? Let me see if I can unblur my screen. Yeah. So if you haven't got it, this is sort of artwork. It's this is a lovely beer. We're going to taste it in a minute. It's a nice one to start on, not too strong. I don't want to get anyone too tipsy too early in this call. The second beer we've got is from Daya Brewery. Daya. It's a lovely beer. Again, it's a bit stronger, 5.2%, steady rolling man. And then the final beer, we've got a Trappist. There's only 11 breweries in the world, or monasteries. So these are brewed by the monks, and there's only 10 or 11 in the world. This is one of them, very respected. This has won awards, which we'll talk a little bit about later. What defines a craft beer? There's no law on what defines a craft beer. I think in this day and age, it's I'm sure many people here will know their stuff as well, and will agree it's really about smaller brewers that are dedicated to the passion side of beer, how it's made, not just mass-produced commercial beer as we all would know, and they really focus on flavour. So we're starting with a modern sour beer. You can pour these how you like. I'm sure everyone here has poured a beer, but we don't want to pour this one too quick. We want small amount of head. Don't want to take out too much of the carbonation, but we want to get as much flavor out of that as we can. So there's no real wrong or right way to taste craft beers, but it's very interesting hearing the different flavor profiles people get. This is going to be very obvious, some sort of yogurt and strawberry flavors, I hope. The way it's brewed, which we'll go through in a second, is slightly different to the others. There's a sort of friendly yeast to get this, which is found in yogurt, that they will add through the brewing process, and that's how it gets its sort of creamy taste. It also uses strawberry puree, quite a lot of strawberry puree to get that strawberry flavour. So without further ado, this is nice and cold. I hope everyone's beer is nice and cold, or however you prefer the temperature. But usually we'd like to let these set, especially the Trappist. Usually it's these are bottled beers, they're quite good, but craft beers, nice to leave them for 1 or 2 minutes before you pour. However, these 3, because we knew that they were going in the post, they're quite big in the craft world, all 3 brewers and all 3 beers. So they're all, you very rarely get any sediment or leftover particles at the bottom of the cans or bottles. So I'm not sure if anyone's pouring with me. I hope they are. Feel free to turn your cameras on if you'd like to. This has got like a real rosy colour. I'm having it in a kind of a mini schooner glass, which is my favourite type of glass to drink out. Some people will have a classic jug or a beer jug. I quite prefer smaller glass, but it's all personal preference. So it'd be very interesting to hear what people taste, but smelling it for me personally, it's instantly strawberry yogurt. Reminds me very summery, and the taste is it's a nice easy drinker, a very nice one to start with. Essentially the beer, its brewing process is quite simple. As I said, they use lactobacillus, I believe it's called, which is it's a friendly bacteria found in yogurt, and that's what gives it kind of a smooth, creamy type texture. And the name of the beer, Strawberry Fields, is named after the Beatles. So Strawberry Fields. I'm not sure the complete origin of that song. I'm sure someone here would know that, but something to do with Lennon and in Strawberry Fields, I believe, when he was very young. Does anyone have any questions about the brewery or the beer, the flavors? Has anyone tasted the same stuff as me? I think it's going to be quite an obvious first beer to taste, really, as a bit more of a session craft. But yeah, it is very, very strawberry fromage, very like creamy strawberry.
I do, if you don't mind. Is there a rule of thumb on you want to pour some types of beer more aggressively to get more of a head on it, or not?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of that will come down to personal preference. Today, I would suggest we pour most of them fairly slow. However, the Trappiste, I think I had one of these last night to have a little tester taste. It's quite nice to get a little bit more of a head if you can. It pours out very smoothly. Again, I don't like taking too much carb. I like it carbonated, but if you had like a lager like Peroni, for example, it's far too carbonated. I don't really like a lager. I prefer craft beer or ales, IPAs, or real ales. Personally, most of the time, these are developing in the bottle or can, so the process, the carbonation will happen naturally. So it's really personal preference. I would say that's the slowest. You're not going to get too much head out of that anyway. It's nice to have probably half an inch on that. With this, I'd say all down to personal preference. Once it's nice and cold, you can pour 45-degree angle, but a little bit faster towards the end, which we'll do together later. So yeah, and then the steady rolling, man, that's, if I'm honest, very similar pour to the Strawberry Fields. It's not too overly frothy. This is our one that won an award, which we'll talk about a little later. But yeah, that's the Strawberry Fields from Vault City. Great brewers. They're from Scotland, Edinburgh, I believe. And yeah, it's a modern sour beer. They've sort of, as a brewery, Vault City are pioneering the sour beer market over the last few years in the UK. So they have really made it mainstream, and you'll see this a lot more. This used to be a very small brewery. This is actually the only drink I believe today you'd be able to find in probably a supermarket. So the other beers, you know, we'll talk a bit more about the history a little bit later of the others, but that's probably the most mainstream in sense you can pick that up most high streets. So they are becoming really popular, mainly for their very forgiving flavour. It's very easy to drink, a very nice session. Personally, I can have one or two of them myself. Very sweet. So I'd probably move on to a pale ale or a nice craft, or something a little bit different. But 4.5 is probably my strength. I don't like anything too strong, although that is very palatable, which we'll get to later. So if you haven't noticed already, and you have this is a 9.2%. They have 3 different versions of this. I purposely chose the strongest because we'll leave that till the end of the session as our final craft. But yeah, no, great. Cheers. And whoever is drinking with me, I hope you enjoy it. And it's quite a lot of beer to get through one session. So get your other. It's very hot today. I'm sure it is where most of us are. So please keep the next 2 in the fridge. Mine have already started to warm up a little, so I'm going to do that. It's also good to keep your glasses cold especially if you're drinking this sort of stuff at home. Put your glass in the fridge for half an hour, or the freezer for 10 minutes. If you like your beer really nice and cold, like I do. But a lot of people, I do know a few people that like their craft room temperature, or same as like a real ale out the cellar, so just nothing too cold. I find, especially in this weather, it's going to heat up quite quickly in the glass, and you don't want to lose the flavour too quickly. When it's freezing, you don't actually, you'll sort of see as it warms up a little bit, you'll taste different flavours, different notes. There's very simple flavours. Whoever's drinking this right now, and this one is strawberry and cream, sour, a classic sour. But I shall.
Very nice, Jake. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Jake.
I'll be here for the next one, and I'll pass you back.
Thank you. So
Thanks.
over to David to talk a bit more about what a good archive might look like.
Excellent. Yeah, this is fun. So let's just jump right back in, and we're going to stay a little bit at a high level, and then we're going to show you how to apply this with, frankly, one of Spectra's products. But what does a really good archive look like, and what do you need to keep in mind? And so this is fun. We're going to start at a high level, and then we're going to talk about some specific features you need to be looking for of an archive. So restorability is critical, and we've covered that a couple of times generically, but what we mean by that is your ability to come back years later, get that object back, and make it valuable, actually be able to read it and do something with it. There was an effort at one point to standardize on this and actually store objects with the things that will read them, especially in the media and entertainment industry. So it was really about storing an object and then saying, hey, let's make sure the software that can open that file is stored with the object, and making sure that it's restorable. So save it with its own software. But just as important is saving in native format, standalone recovery using open standards, something that can be read 10 or 15 years from now and isn't a proprietary standard. There's a fancy word we use in archive called fixity. And it depends on who you're talking to, what they really mean by it. If you're part of a government organization that's really trying to preserve history, it's about making sure that everything is checked all the way through, that I've got CRCs and error checking all the way through. But the definition is an assurance that an object is unchanged over time. That means not just from the moment I put it down on whatever media it's getting stored at, but I'm going to go back and check that every once in a while. I'm going to scan it. I'm going to pull that data back and make sure that it's still good. I'm going to make sure it's still usable. And I have some system in place that can auto heal, that can make sure that hey, I've got 2 copies and one of them is sketchy. I'm going to make sure that I fix that copy before it's too late. So fixity has a connotation that means equality over time. It has to be usable. And my favorite story actually ever is from, it was actually Cambridge University, and forget which group, but it was the central IT organization. And they said, I really need a self-service archive. I don't think you know how hard this is to have, thousands of people using a product. I had Microsoft make a little change to Microsoft Word, and the place where you go click the button to make a word bold changed very subtly in one version of Word. And it took months to retrain people on how to just use Microsoft Word. So you can't have a system that you have to have training for. So it either has to be automatic. For the administrators, it needs to be, monitoring needs to be simple. For users, it needs to be, a self-service system where I don't have to send them to class to be able to use an archive. It has to be just automatic and simple. And it has to be searchable. We have to be able to grab metadata over time and attach it to those objects. Very important. And of course, I'm starting to hint towards things that Spectra can offer you, but long-term stability. So how do I know that data that I've saved is really going to be there 15 years ago? I've got the fixity. I'm going to double check it. But what about the systems it's stored on? certainly disk is good for 5 years. I don't think people understand some of the tape systems that are out there. We've got physical systems that have been in continuous 24/7 use for over 20 years. Literally the same physical system. Now, of course, we service it and we do preventative maintenance, that sort of thing. But tape is not a short-term thing. You don't have to migrate if you don't want to. It's a choice based on cost and power and size of your physical unit, but it really is good for a long period of time. And long-term stability also means long-term ownership. So we talk about an on-premises version. You'll see in a minute, cloud is an option, but if you quit paying your bill, you're going to find out real quickly whether you really own that data or not. And the cost of getting it back is important. It's also important to consider an archive that is multi-tenant. So certainly all the things we've talked about this morning, both backup and archive, should be used concurrently with the same system. So let's talk about the actual system, the architecture, and we'll jump into a demo. I think another beer and then a demo. The archive system itself, there's two pieces to it. There's how I'm going to archive, the software that you use, and what am I going to store it on. So let's start with the how first. So consider the software that you use. And you saw a lot of them. There's people like iRods does archive off of their system, HBSS for big, large format archives, and we are happy to be the tape layer behind that. But for general IT systems, we're going to talk about how some of the Spectra systems and some of the others that are out there. Consider flexibility. You need something that can do project-based, that can do tool-based, that can do policy-based systems, that provides a true self-service archive that does not save things in a proprietary format. So it's really critical that for archive in particular, it's fine for backup. Incremental forever, for instance, is not something you can read and grab a file from without that top-level software. You need something that even if Spectra dissolves, 50 years from now, and we're not here, you can still get your objects back, and you can get it back with the security that you need. So we're going to end today with StoreCycle and this product that we have that really makes archive simple. The question then is, what do you store it on? Where am I sending my archive? Cloud seems like an obvious kind of a target. And of course, a lot of people are starting to do that. I think there's two items here. And who really owns the data when you send it to the cloud? And we've absolutely had customers that, for whatever reason, couldn't pay their bill for a period of time. And there is a point at which the public cloud folks will start deleting your data. It's not yours if you don't pay your bill. It's also not yours if you can't get it back, if you can't afford to get it back out of the cloud. And there's a huge confusion as to how much the cloud actually costs. And I'm not going to go through a big spreadsheet, but I want to point out a couple of lines on here that are really interesting. And so we've got this cloud calculator that we're happy to share with you. And the marketing from, for instance, AWS S3 Glacier Deep Archive public cloud is that it's 99 cents a terabyte per month. And that is what they market. But I think what most people see when you get your bill back is you never get that price. Between API charges for putting things in, you put things in through S3, so you've got a dwell time in the S3 layer. And of course, if I touch the object at all, it costs more. So what's really fascinating is just to put objects in over a 5-year period with no restore, you get up into the $4, $5, $6 per terabyte per month region just for putting it in to Amazon Glacier. You touch it, it's really easy to get over $10 a month. So I know, public cloud isn't the most popular thing in Europe as it is in the US, but I'll just make you aware, of course, our marketing people are different, but marketing people lie. And so that 99 cents a gig or a terabyte per month is really not what people pay. So be wary of the cloud. Disk is certainly an option. Ready access is very important. And NAS is there, S3 disk is there. Power is a huge concern. and you really do have to refresh it every 5 years. So we push and say, tape is still really an excellent, viable option for archive, and it's good for 20, 30 years. It's an amazing kind of a product. It's low cost, it's low power. And now that we've put an S3 system in front of that, it obfuscates, all of the complication behind. And I'll wrap up my part with just saying, we still have some people say, yeah, I want all those things. I want low cost. I want low power. I want 20 years of protection. I want to own my copy. Tape is a good choice, but I don't want tape here for whatever reason. I don't want people messing with it, or I don't have the space. Spectra now offers tape as a service. I would encourage you to go take a look at that through geyserdata.com. It's a collaboration. It's a really interesting thing. You rent tapes, buy the tape by the month, and if ever you want it back, if you ever quit paying your bill or you want your tapes back, we mail them to you. So there's no question about ownership. It's a really interesting thing. We put the library in a local MSP, and it's there for you. So I think, Scott, I'll turn it back over. That's the portion on archive.
Very interesting, David. Thank you. I will just throw in a little note there. You can abuse the economics of cloud storage a little bit. If you have a substantial analysis process that you run periodically, using your archival software to push a copy to cloud that will be temporary, spinning up that large amount of compute to run your analysis, which is also temporary, and then extracting only your results and deleting everything else means you don't pay the egress charges. You don't need to have a massive compute sitting around for only occasional use. And this kind of temporary requirement-based, project-based use of cloud is where you will drive the best economics. Long-term storage, not the best economics. Static workloads, not the best economics. But if you can take an occasional requirement and use cloud to deliver that, that's where you can start to get some real value. But with that, we're going to hand over to John from the National Manufacturing Institute of Scotland to talk a bit about what NMIS does and how they're using archive in their research platform. So, John, would you like me to run the slides, or are you going to share your own?
No, I'll share the slides myself.
Fantastic. I will spotlight you.
Oh, I will.
And away you go.
Thank you very much for having me. So, yeah, as kind of spoken about there, we are using data storage for our archiving and data storage within our research. So the talk today is just going to be about our kind of journey to Industry 4.0. So I'll explain a little bit what NMIS is, because most people probably won't have heard of it, but we're the National Manufacturing Institute of Scotland. What we do is to try and intertwine with industry, academia, and the public sector to work together in groundbreaking manufacturing research to, again, help improve productivity levels and make companies more competitive and upskill those in the current workforce. So at the top of the screen there, you'll see that we are operated by the University of Strathclyde, which is in Glasgow. We are part of the High Value Catapult, which is a government-funded body, and then we are supported by lots of the other funding bodies that I would imagine lots of you are aware of, so like Skills Development, Scottish Enterprise, Renfrewshire Council. So a little history of us. We started off as the Advanced Forming Research Centre in 2009, so we have been around here for quite a long while, which was all about forging and forming. We worked quite closely with Rolls-Royce out at Glasgow Airport. So again, this is where data has always been very important to us, especially in collaboration, sharing the data. And again, depending on our contracts, we do have to keep data for set periods of length. So normally that is between 3 and 5 years. Moving on to 2017, we then started to expand. We've got lightweight manufacturing, which is all about lightweight composites. So you think wind farms, you think automotive or aerospace. We've got digital factory, again, really pushing this whole Industry 4.0 digitization. Think all the buzzwords like AI, machine learning, etc. Recently, we opened up in Ayrshire, the Digital Process Manufacturing Centre, which really is all about this continuous manufacturing. So think things like food and beverage, chemicals, etc. Because again, as you can see from our history, we've kind of came back from a very discrete kind of manufacturing. We're looking into this continuous where a lot of that kind of data challenges are coming. So what is Industry 4.0? It really is about getting data from your machines and getting it to business decision-making tools so that could help businesses make better choices and fully understand their workflow. Just to give you a quick breakdown, Industry 1 was the steam engine, Industry 2 was electrification, and Industry 3 was computerization. So you're thinking your CNCs, you know, how people could individually program them. So now Industry 4 is really looking at this. Okay, we've got lots of these different data silos of machines which people are programming. They've got data, it's got tags. How do we collect that all together, put it into a centralized place, or what you'll see sometimes in industry called a unified namespace, and how can others access this data as and when they need it? So since we're a research centre, we get the opportunity to basically test things out, proof of concepts, you know, show industry how best to go about these things. What we do, we sometimes fail, but that is the lessons learned we do share with industry. But for this project, over at the Advanced Farm Research Centre, we had 73 machines. We're going to be connecting. Some of them moved over to a nice building that you can see behind me here. But, you know, as I say, 73 machines, this is a lot of data. Some of these machines are data intense, which gives you lots of data, and others, you know, you're talking about data rates of once a second, nothing too crazy. But just to give you a scale and idea of our workshop there, every kind of green box you see there is either one machine or a couple of machines that we're all trying to pull together. So in a day we can create quite a large volume of data. So again, this is why exactly we worked with XME and Spectra. So just to give you an idea for the kind of typical machines working left to right here, we've got machines with no connectivity, digital I/O. So these things would be simple things like pillar drills, pedestal grinders, bandsaws, you know, things you're essentially switching off and on, turning up a speed or putting it down. You know, you're not going to get a lot of data out of that. So we did connect to these machines doing simple things like energy monitoring, which again is substantial data that we can get from this, and it's not just whether the machine's off or on. It can help us with our understanding our cost of our products and processes, but also it could help with business decisions like overall equipment efficiency, etc. Then in the middle, we're kind of these limited minimal connectivity. So again, this is the really kind of the machines from the Industry 3 kind of era, you would say. So the 500-ton press there. The perfect example is it's using communication protocol called Modbus. It's an old communication it's an old communication process. So we had to update that, edit code, change it in a little bit, and get data from that. So again, a lot of meaningful data was left in that machine, and we're having to, as researchers, trying to align this data all together at a later date, which could be quite challenging. So the whole point of this Industry 4.0 was to get the time, basically the timestamps all unified so it all comes at the same time. So the perfect example would be the item would go in the furnace, as it says there, with a temperature recorder, and then we'd move that quickly into the press, and they would do the process. And before we had this kind of data storage, a single source of data, we would have to collect two siloed bits of data and then try and align them again with their timestamps. So again, a lot of time was wasted in this types of research because you weren't having that unified process. And then last, we're really getting into the kind of high end of feature forge. It's a large forging process which can do open and closed die casting if you're that way inclined. But essentially, it does hundreds of tons of material. It has a gas furnace, electric furnace, it's got a manipulator. So there's lots of individual systems with lots of data coming through there. And as you can see there in the image, is a kind of 3D digital twin. This page is just to give you an idea of kind of what we did and how we went about it. So as I say, we've got energy meters going on to the simple things like pillar drills. We've then got a Modbus gateway, and we're using machine communication software like Ignition or Predator to communicate with these machines. And all this data had to go somewhere because, again, we had to store it for research purposes. And then once the results from the research is done, we have to share it with the client. And again, depending on our contract, we do need to keep this data available for like 3 to 5 years. So again, this is where the kind of archiving was quite important to NMIS, because we do have that requirement. Again, we're just going to go into the kind of the limited connectivity of essentially how we pulled together lots of data from different sources. So the 500-ton press, the new temperature sensors, etc. And then again, showing you just how one machine has actually quite a lot of data coming from it. And again, you'd be surprised how quickly this can fill up data storage. And then the complex system that I kind of spoke about with FutureForge, as I've kind of alluded to or shown there, it's essentially we've got 4 separate PLCs communicating together, extracting data from it. So we've got, like one from the manipulator, one from the forge itself, one from the gas furnace, electric furnace, and we're also doing things with vision systems as well. So again, even more data will be going through these types of systems that we're really needing to store. So again, just to demonstrate that we had this use case, which again, everyone in manufacturing is talking about Industry 4.0, but there's simple things and challenges that we needed to demonstrate to industry that need to be dealt with, and that data storage is exactly one of them. Just to give you a kind of high-level idea of how this works, this is at the very bottom there. You'll see, hopefully, you'll see, sensors, devices, machines. We also had environmental monitoring. So again, lots and lots of data, which is going into the cogs there at the bottom, which was the Predator software, which speaks the language of the machines essentially. And then on the right-hand side, we were saving that to a database. It was a Microsoft database originally. It got very full very fast, so we had to set up rules to move data. So again, this is why we worked with XMA and Spectra to get a solution so we could store data more in the kind of long term. And at the very top there, I should have just said as well, this was Expert Factory, which is a kind of dashboard software. So again, what does that culminate to? Our dashboard showcasing each individual machine within our facility. So again, that's lots of data that we are showing live data of. They can also dive into it and look historically. So you can see here up at the top, we've got power consumption. So that kind of shows them a live graph of the power consumption. So again, that's another system we're pulling data from. Down the bottom, we've got the tags and information from the machine itself, and you can click about and create your own unique graphs with all the data, because again, it's communicating with the database to create that. So again, this was one of our big kind of challenges, is how do we store and maintain this data? So, as I say, we worked with XMA Spectra, and we came to this solution. So at the top, you can see we are running an Apollo server, which is running the store cycle. Then we've got the Black Pearl, which is a kind of disk, and then the Spectra stack with the tape at the bottom. So we were very much, as I think we've said in this call, the university is hesitant to use cloud storage for security reasons, and a lot of our customers are quite unwilling to use that. So we had to demonstrate kind of on-premise how that kind of storage. So we've got that kind of hot to cold tier storage, and it connects. So hopefully see the red lines there. It all connects to our university network. So we do have a lot of high power computing. We've also got other data servers that we want to connect with, whether that be the university itself or whether it be customers. So again, this whole system is designed that any kind of project that goes through any of these machines within the facility, we will have a version of that data saved here that we can go back, look at, and whether it be to do further research, to do further analysis, or whether it is just to share that kind of data with our customers, because as I say, we do need to archive this data, and it's all based off of our customer relationships / our kind of funding body. And then just as the kind of last slide, just to kind of show you there, I've shown you kind of Industry 4.0, the main project I worked on to kind of to demonstrate to industry, how you would go about completing that in the workshop and how you get that data to the data storage. But here are some of the examples of some of the things we do with that data that we are collecting and storing. So if you look at the top left, you're seeing distortion prediction models. So again, that is taking data from the machine, a DMG, if any of you are that way inclined, and it is taking that data and it's doing prediction modeling on the positioning of the milling and seeing how likely it is to bend and flex. So again, simulation takes up a lot of data. Again, that's another reason why we need access use of large volumes of data, because again, we will keep some of these models for later analysis or just, as I say, for the customers. Top right, we do complete simulations of workshops there using some of the Siemens software. And again, that creates a lot of data. So this is for kind of event simulation analysis to kind of understand, well, how could you set out your manufacturing workshop floor. So again, that takes up a lot of data because you're talking about lots of models, you're running it, and then you're outputting the simulation and the data itself to say, well, if you use this machine, you would be getting X amount. Bottom left-hand corner there, you'll see it's very much like the Google Street View. We do that for manufacturing facilities. So again, to help with that whole event simulation within manufacturing. So again, that's large volumes of data that we, for the longest time, had struggled to store because again, we were beholden to the university and using some of their storage facilities. And then finally, just to the bottom right, this is a whiskey cask filling, so very appropriate to the kind of the beer and tasting we've got today. We're doing a full 3D digital twin. So that is a digital twin of a system that exists within the facility technically behind me. And so we have lots of data from the actual machine itself going into this digital twin. So again, that's where this we really needed a central place for us to store data for researching quickly, but also for that archiving purpose to share at a later date, and even for us to go back and do a historical type analysis. That's really my presentation. Hopefully it gave you an insight into why manufacturing would be even interested in this, because I know we've spoken a little bit about media and why they would do it. That makes it's probably quite an obvious reason why you think they'd want to archive it, but there is also many other industries out there, especially manufacturing, that this kind of archiving really is required and is good for us to have. So if you have any questions, do let me know. Happy to answer them. If not, thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you, John.
Problem.
So with that, we're going to go into a quick number 2 beer tasting. And then we'll go over to Sean for a demonstration of what this looks like in practice. But Jake, over to you.
Hello, everyone. I'm back. That was all great. Thank you. So we're on beer 2. It's from Dare Brewery. One of my favourite types of beer. It's a hazy pale ale, and the brewery are very well known for craft beer and very well respected. A lot of the time on releases, they'd have people queuing outside the brewery to try the new beers. So you can see that okay. This is another one. It's nice to get really cold, but not too cold, 6 to 8 degrees. You don't want it overly cold because you're going to not get the flavour straight away. However, if sadly we only I just saw a message come up. Sorry.
Sorry, I was chatting to someone in the chat.
Thought that was for me. This is another beer. It's so hot at the moment. I would get it nice and cold personally, because sitting outside for 10-15 minutes, it gets to the right temperature anyway. So as I said, this is inspired by music. Another beer inspired by music. Steady Rolling Man, this is. So I'm going to use a jug now. I'm going to pour this. As I mentioned before, this one's a bit more 45-degree angle. I like a head on my IPAs, my hazy. But again, not too much that we take out too much carbonation. That's about right for me. The main thing is you can instantly smell those sort of tropical fruits, almost peach, mango, that sort of flavors. And I do like a jug. It doesn't warm up your glass as quick, especially in this weather. So larger canned beer like that, it's that's half a litre, these cans. So 500 ml, quite nice in a jug. This is a 5.2%, so just over a premium beer, which is from 5. So it's not quite a session. However, whoever's tasting it, I'm sure you'd agree it's palatable to be a session beer. A little bit riskier, but it's very easy to drink. So hope you enjoy it. Quite fizzy, quite carbonated already, but as I said, depending on how you like to pour and how cold you get it, you're going to remove a lot of that carbonation just in the pour. But I think in the heat, you can already tell it's the glass is warming up the beer already. So this is definitely a good beer to get cold. They're not the cheapest beers. It's a smaller brewery, so not hugely mass produced, but it's a very popular. Untapped, like certain craft brewery websites, forums, given this high ratings, lots of awards year on year, and it's sort of their staple beer. So it's it's another very flavoursome beer. If anyone is drinking this right now and has any questions about the taste or the brewery, feel free. Otherwise, I'll pass you back.
Fantastic, thanks, Jake.
Thank you.
A little note there: if anyone likes their beer or soft drinks really cold, I have a stein made from a Dewar flask, like you would put liquid nitrogen into. It is a bit heavy and a bit expensive and a bit fragile, but it will keep your drink ice cold for days if you need to. It will be just as cold by the time you finish it as when you started.
Wow! So you top it up each time. How does it work?
Well, it's an extremely good effective insulator. You can put liquid nitrogen in there and it will still be liquid the next morning. So if you put a cold drink in there, it might lose a degree over the next hour or two.
So is it? I'm using a proper German stein with ice water to get my beers cold out here. But is it like that size, but just really?
Well, you can get all sorts of sizes. You can get like 200 ml up to like 5 litres, but you don't want to know how expensive and heavy a 5 litre one is.
Yeah, that's great. I'll check that out, definitely. Cheers, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Jake. Sean, are you ready to go with a demo?
I certainly am. Thank you.
Sean is demoing live, so we all need to be aware of the live demo curse, but fingers crossed for him.
So I'll share my slides, since I'll be in slides, in demo, back in a slide, so to make it a little bit easier for all of us. So first off, let's get this going. So what I'm going to be demonstrating for you all is a solution from ours called StoreCycle. Now, I think, keeping with the theme of beer, managing data is very much like brewing a fine craft beer. You don't leave every batch on the brew floor. You're going to be aging it, you're going to be archiving it or storing it and optimizing where it lives. StoreCycle is effectively your brewmaster for your data. You identify what data is idle, you migrate it smartly, and keep it accessible and secure. So that's in the context of brewing beer, what StoreCycle does. In another way we can put that is just speaking in general IT terms. Spectra's StoreCycle is a storage lifecycle management software that is designed for data-intensive organizations that will help you to automate the process of moving inactive data to more cost-effective storage tiers, while ensuring that there's access to the data and that the data remains protected. And what you've heard from David and both from Scott is exactly the importance of archive. And so how we do that is through one of our solutions called StoreCycle. So what I have on the screen here for you, my very sensitive mouse, I want to just get the laser pointer going. StoreCycle is software that you install on a server. The server can be a virtual machine, or it can also be on bare metal. When you install StoreCycle, you give it access to your primary tier 1 production storage, or potentially even some of your capacity storage. But typically it will be your unstructured data that you will provide access to StoreCycle. Through StoreCycle, you can then run scans across your storage to determine which data, which objects, which files are cold, have not been accessed, and therefore are consuming up expensive real estate on your primary storage tier. And through policies or projects that you set up on StoreCycle, StoreCycle can then automate the movement of the data from your source storage to any target storage that you may see on the right-hand side. What we are going to be talking about predominantly is you want to really store that on a secure, cost-effective, reliable, long-term preservation platform, which is a SpectraLogic object-based disk. You may have heard the talk about Black Pearl that John shared with us, which will then eventually store that securely on tape. And potentially, if you also would like to keep a belts and braces copy that you're never really going to access, but you just want to make sure you have a belts and braces copy, you can send it off to the public cloud, for example, or potentially another device in a far-off location. We can also, of course, do that with StoreCycle. So that's what I'm going to demonstrate for you today. And hopefully what StoreCycle, what this slide has given you, is giving you a bit of an understanding of what StoreCycle actually is. So going into the demonstration, getting out of my presentation, what I'm going to show you here is I have on my server, I've got a number of files, and granted they're only a few files because it's just a demonstration. These are marketing files from SpectraLogic, which I believe are reasonably old. They are very important, and I'd like to keep access to them. And I want to take them from my source location, which is in the folder over here, and I want to automate the movement of those files to my target location. But what I also want to do is I want to make sure that when my files have moved from here to the target, that I still have a way of accessing those files, but that they're not using up all of the disk space that's on my primary storage. Now, in order to do that, I am going to go into my StoreCycle system that I've installed. So I'm going to log in to StoreCycle, which will bring me to my dashboard. And the dashboard will give you all sorts of information about how much data you've migrated, how much target storage has been consumed for various projects. It'll show you how your jobs have performed. It'll show you completed scans that you've undertaken. Now, in this particular case, I've somewhat preempted myself by saying I know which files I want to move off. However, what I would like to show you, one of the powerful features of StoreCycle is the ability to scan your primary storage, or as we call it in StoreCycle nomenclature, your source storage. Now I've gone and made it a little bit too big over there. So if we scan, let me just get that smaller. Fresh. I would like to scan that technology area, that source location that I have. So I want to create a new scan. The scan, I've got a copy of what I'm going to call that scan project. So I'm just to speed up the typing, I'm going to create a scan called Demo XMA Webinar. Now, I want to determine what the source is. You may remember that the source is this folder over here. So I've already configured that source in StoreCycle. So I go and select the source. You can see I've got a number of sources created over here. I'm just going to select the demo source, which is where those files are located. I can also determine where particularly I want to start. I'm going to start at the base of that folder structure. Now I've identified the source that I want to scan. I can next go and determine when do I want to scan that source. It is possible to scan it immediately. I can set a start time sometime in the future, or I can potentially set up a regular scanning schedule that will reoccur on a daily basis or a weekly basis, depending on how much data changes in my source, which will then drive how frequently I want to move data from the source to the target. In this particular case, I'm going to submit this job and it will do a scan immediately. Now, when you look at the scan job, it's already ran. It's very, very fast because it's on a demo environment. And there's only 3 files. When you have a look at that, you'll see it will tell you that there are files that are between bigger than a meg and bigger than 10 meg that are between 0 to 30 days old. So what you would really see in a real live system is more data in this particular space. So I'm going to show you a scan I did just as an example of a personal NAS device that I have installed in my home network. If I look at that scan, you can see this is a bit more accurate of how it shows me that you can see most of the data that I have in my personal NAS device is more than a year old. So if you're a business, you'll say, well, all of this data is more than a year old. It hasn't been accessed. Why am I keeping it in my primary storage? Let's use this scan result to create a project that will move that data from the source to the target. So once I've ran the scan, I now have the information that I need to go and create a migrate or a store project. The migrate or store project is where you go and configure the policy that you will use to move the data from the source to the target. And we'll quickly go through setting that up. So I'm going to create a new migrate and restore project. So again, I just want to quickly grab the project name over there without having to, as if my mouse works properly. There we go. That's my project name. The name can be anything I want it to be. I can give it a description. So I can just say this is a demo project. And now I need to determine what is the source location of my information that I want to determine how old it is before I move it off to my target. So I've configured that source location before, which you may recall was the same location we scanned. So I select the source location. And once again, I can over here determine where I want to start in that particular folder structure. I'm starting right at the beginning of the folder structure. I click on Next. What I can do now is I can determine either use a scan that I ran before. This is a scan that I just ran, or I can do a scan before I actually do the migration job. And that is where running the recurring scans can potentially be used when you create up your project. I'm just, for purpose of demonstration, going to do a scan before we start. Next, I can configure the object age. So I'm only going to move files that are larger than 30, 90, 6 months, so on and so forth. And I can also set custom days. I'm just going to go for all of them for purposes of the demonstration. And similarly, I can also determine what file sizes I'll be moving. As you can see, you've got a selection of file sizes that you can choose. And this is picking up the last scan. So you can see here the potential savings. In this case will be a 20 megabytes that I can potentially save. So on this file parameters, I can clearly determine exactly what I want to move from my source storage, which is consuming space that I do not want it to consume. I also have the ability to do includes and excludes for files and directories, so that you are making sure you're only moving the appropriate data from your source to your target. So I've configured my source and the files and the parameters for my source. I now need to go next, and I need to choose the target location that I want to move those files to. So this will be my target storage that's more cost effective for long-term preservation and securing of my data. I've already created a target device in StoreCycle, which I'm going to select here. You can also select up to 3 different targets if you want to. So I can use StoreCycle to move the data or copy the data from my source to a black pool, which is the cache that will send it to tape, to another NAS device, and even to the cloud at the same time. Again, for our demonstration purposes, we're just going to move it to another cost-effective storage location. Now, when I move the files, that means I'm going to remove them from my source. I can determine what I would like to do with the source location. I can either keep the file, I can remove the file and leave nothing behind. As you can see, there's a number of options you can choose here. I'm going to remove the source file and create an HTML link, which will allow the user to access the file in the future, even though it's no longer on the source location. I can do other things around the movement of the files. And now my mouse has stopped working, which is not what we want. Let me see what's going on there. Oh. As you said, Scott, this is typical of demos, isn't it? Let me click on next.
Is it the mouse or the third beer? Which one?
Yeah, I think maybe the beer, actually. We can choose a delay in the movement of those files, as you can specify here. And alternatively, you can add additional tags. You may recall David mentioned this to make it easier to find the information when you go and browse to recover the files if you're not using it through the source location. So it's just basically a tag value pair that you add in here. I'm not going to add any tags. So now we know what the source location is. We know what the target location is. We know we're going to leave behind an HTML link and move the files away from the source location. Next, what we need to do is we can then schedule this project to run. Similarly to the scan, you can set it up to run at a specific time, or you can set a recurring schedule so it happen every day or once a week, depending on what meets your needs. I'm going to just run start now. When I click submit, the project that I've defined is going to move the files which I showed you earlier. It's going to move these files to here, and eventually it will replace these files with an HTML link. So going back to StoreCycle, I click submit, and you'll see here that the project has ran. And of course, very quickly, because I'm using local disks to make that happen. However, you'll see that it's not completed successfully. It says post-action pending. Now, one important thing to understand from StoreCycle is, and David touched on this as well, is the importance of the fixity of the data in your archive. StoreCycle does a number of CRC checks as it picks up the file, moves the file, and places the file in the target location. The other thing that StoreCycle also does is it won't delete the source file until there's been at least 2 backups of the StoreCycle database. StoreCycle stores every operation that you've seen me show you here inside of its database, which means you need to protect that database. And the reason you would do that is if there's in the unlikely event that your StoreCycle server crashes or fails, or there's some sort of disaster in your data center, you can install a new StoreCycle instance, and you can then import the database, which will allow you to recover those files successfully. And without the database, you will be impacting your ability to recover. So I'm going to just quickly go into the configuration screen and run 2 very quick backups that I've already scheduled. So I'm going to run this backup, and we'll see the backup is busy running. It's completed. Remember, I said it needs to do at least 2 full backups. We always like to have more than 1 copy of a backup. So we run another backup. That backup is running. So that backup is successfully completed. And now it's a drum roll, fingers crossed. And what we can see has happened here. These files have moved from the source location to the target location. And what's left behind is an HTML text file You can see the files are 10 meg, 6 meg, and 3 meg, and these are just a few kilobytes. So if I'm on my server where this folder actually is, which is over here, and I actually go and have a look at those folders, which is over here, you can see that these files are HTML. So as a user, they're still there in the folder. And when I double click on that file to access it, it will open up a web splash screen where the user can then request to have that restored. And when you do the restore request, depending on how StoreCycle has been configured, StoreCycle will go and fetch that file and restore it back for you. So that, folks, is a very, very brief demo. Happy to dive in further, but hopefully that gives you an idea of how quick and easy it is to set up a storage lifecycle, data lifecycle management project and policies for moving data that's stale but valuable from a source location to a more effective target location. Now, as I finish the demo, I do also want to briefly mention to you, jumping back into my presentation, is that Spectra offers a storage analysis, a StoreCycle storage analysis that you can purchase from us, which will allow you to where we will come and install StoreCycle into your environment to do an analysis. As you already know, and we've mentioned that quite a few times, is there's this exponential data growth. High performance storage is expensive. You don't want to have infrequent accessed data on it. And of course, as David mentioned, traditional backups aren't designed for efficient data tiering or for archiving. So what does the StoreCycle storage analysis do? It uses StoreCycle to do a comprehensive analysis of your storage sources to identify inactive data. And by knowing what that inactive data is, based on the file types, the file size, and the file age, it provides you with actionable insights to move that data to a more optimized storage location. And what it also allows you to do is to remain compliant and have better data lifecycle management. And of course, the benefits are that you're reducing your costs, especially because you don't need to buy more expensive primary storage, and you're moving it to sustainable, green, long-term preservation storage, which is very cost effective, as Scott mentioned to you before. You will most definitely improve the performance of your tier 1 storage. It helps you to maintain your compliance because you're retaining the data and you're not overburdening your primary storage. And of course, you have user transparency. As I showed you, I can still access information via the HTML link. So we did a storage analysis for a university's research department in the US, where they had around a petabyte of mixed research data that was growing rapidly. We used the StoreCycle to do a storage analysis, and we found that over 40% of the data was inactive. And so what that did is it allowed them to migrate inactive data to a SpectraLogic solution, which delayed the requirement to buy additional SAN or tier 1 storage by 18 months. So really effective way of quickly helping you to identify stale, cold data that's valuable and you need to retain, but retain it on the most appropriate and secure tier. What you do get then from us is you get a report, and this is just really a snapshot of the report that will show you, using a number of charts, the sizes of your files, how they're distributed across age. And it'll also show you the file types that you have, which will then give you those insights that you need to work out exactly what policies you need to create within StoreCycle so that you can archive that project data from this source storage to the target storage. And that is my section complete. Thank you, Scott.
Thanks, Sean. Really interesting. And I hope the takeaway that people got there is that with a handful of very simple options, you can use StoreCycle to deliver powerful, complex outcomes. The difficult part of StoreCycle is deciding where you want your data to be moved and copied to and under what circumstances. It's not getting StoreCycle to do it. That's really straightforward. But with that, we'll go into the last beer tasting. Thank you to everyone who stuck with us. And that will be the end of the webinar after we've all tried the third beer. So, Jake, over to you.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Okay, so our last last but not least, strongest beer. It's probably good. It's 5:30 now on a Thursday. I've got mine nice and cold. I had to put it on ice for a little while because it was getting quite warm out here. I've got my jug nice and cold as well. This is Trappist. So I mentioned earlier, this is one of 11 monasteries where monks still brew the beer. They don't chase scale, they chase good quality. They make enough beer just to sort of provide support for the Abbaye Notre Dame, which is the brewery. It is a strong beer. It's a very dark amber ale. I do have a bottle open with me. If anyone has their bottle and would like to pour it, a lot of the time I'd probably drink these out of the bottle, but I want you to see the colour properly, so I'm gonna pour this. This is going to have a nice head on it, I believe. So I'll go nice and slow. I'm going to stop there for a moment. It's another beer that you're instantly going to take some of the carbonation out and instantly smell a lot of the flavour. So with this particular beer, it's a strong. It's definitely not a session beer, but it is a strong beer. It's sort of amber, toffee tastes or smell in there. It's very, for a 9.2%, it's very nice to drink. Very smooth. I did have this last night. I tried it for the first time, but it's a very famous beer. It's very, very hard to come by unless you know your craft beer shops. But this is, again, a sort of beer that flavors with age in the bottle. This is quite carbonated already, so I like to take a little bit of the carbonation out. But this is the final beer. This is the only one I was sort of worried about pouring yesterday. Was you might get some sediment at the bottom if you don't, let it settle. But it's such a clean beer. It really depends on when it was bottled and brewed. So this is obviously quite fresh. It's quite a popular beer in Belgium. And again, yeah, cheers. It's a very, very nice final beer to finish on. I hope it's not too strong for everyone. It should be quite smooth. Does anyone have any questions about that one?
I don't have any questions specifically about that one, but it's where can we get these beers at a later date?
So I'm going to share a link, which I believe Lewis can send out, and it's going to have lots of information on tasting notes for all of the beers we've sort of gone through today. All the breweries, some more information about that, and also I can attach some links to a couple of my favourite craft beer websites. Depending on where you are in the world or in the UK, you can quite easily find some of these in craft brew shops. Specialists will usually have a particular Trappist beer. So yeah, I'll definitely include a link. I personally have one in Walthamstow, so quite close to where I live, and there must be 30, 40 different breweries that they stock. Not always on large scale, so they had to order the right amount of this in for us for today, which only takes a few days for them. But it is one of those stronger craft beers that you wouldn't usually see it in a supermarket. It's more specialist. They have, I believe they've got 4.5% or 4.3% maybe it was, and something a bit strong about 7.2. So this coming out at 9.2. It's definitely not something you'd rush, but it is easy enough to drink as a quite smooth, quite a smooth beer. But the flavour, it does develop slightly. I can't tell the main changes. I probably drank it a little bit slow yesterday. It warmed up. I'm going to try and drink it a little bit faster today while it's nice and cold. But again, it's this particular beer. It's all about the sort of bottle conditioning, and it continues to sort of age and flavour in the bottle. So this is a great one to check out, and I definitely recommend trying the lower ABV versions. They're all similar tasting, but maybe a little bit more palatable for a session beer. There's the number 4 and the number 6. So yeah, I'll definitely share all of the information. It's hard to have enough time to go through all of our tasting notes and everything, but we'll share loads of information. And again, for the people that hear that didn't weren't able to receive their beers, we will make sure they get sent out. Yeah, hopefully we can do this again. I hope you enjoy the final beer.
Cheers, Jake. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks, Jake.
So a big thank you to all of our speakers, to David, to Sean, to John, and to Jake. Thank you to those of you that are still here and have stuck with us to the end. And thank you, of course, to the people who are listening to the recording in the future. We hope all of you enjoyed it. Please do reach out if there's anything at all we can help you with, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thanks, Scott. Cheers all.
Thanks,
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks.